What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here with a very special guest here at Cheesehead TV. You probably know him if you have been anywhere near this channel for the last few years during the NFL draft. Joseph Randolph joining us, the content creator for Cheesehead TV and our draft guide. He builds our big board, top 150. Everybody who's gotten the draft guide knows Joseph's work. But like I said, if you've been watching the draft for the last few years with us, you know Joseph is the man, the myth, the legend, who knows more about these draft prospects than we ever could. Joseph, how are you tonight, buddy?
I'm doing great, and I just can't wait for next week. This draft class is keeping me up at night, literally.
I don't doubt it. Everyone who tuned in last night, thank you so much. I'm sorry we had to punt till tonight. It's Joseph's day job kind of got in the way, which can happen. Joseph, there are undoubtedly going to be people out there that don't know your background, that don't know where you're coming from, etc. Can you give us just a little kind of brief glimpse into what it is you do during the day, and then how you got into doing this draft stuff in your free time?
So I'm currently an active duty service member in the United States Army. I am just recently coming back from Europe, so a lot of happenings right now. A lot of people you think when you come back home, oh, you got time to rest and there's time for that, but you also got to realize you're bringing back roughly 5,000 people and loads of stuff.
Right.
We're talking about just weapons. You imagine the kind of the crap we haul across the ocean to sustain ourselves.
Don't doubt it.
So
right.
It's kind of crazy right now, but I'm waiting for that break where okay, we can just go to work and not worry about a random ship coming in with a train and oh, we got to move this. It's like, yeah, it's hectic. So
you had something kind of important to do last night. But so how did, I know we've talked a little bit on the draft stream about it, but have you always been a fan of the draft? Have you always been this into it? Did something kind of materialize through your fandom with the Packers or whatever? How did you get into the draft?
I think I started at the firing of Mike Sherman.
Good place to get in.
And I love Mike Sherman, the coach.
Same.
But the picks were just, and I didn't know any better. I was still a young Packer fan. So I was like, this just isn't adding up. And then Ted came in and he was a totally different entity. And then I despised Ted at first. And then as you get a little older, you get a little wiser, you start to understand the old man. And it just kind of went from there.
I love it. Well, let's get into your draft board a little bit here, because I like I said, anybody who's got the draft guide has undoubtedly looked at this big board. Anybody who's watched our draft stream knows how into these players you get and how much work you do to kind of break them down, etc. I will say something that jumped out right away, because there's so much talk every year, obviously, but this year especially, as quarterbacks are expected to go at least first overall, if not the first couple picks. The first player in your draft board is not a quarterback. It's Will Anderson, the edge player from Alabama. Why is Will Anderson your number one player in this draft?
I had to kind of discipline myself, and maybe I fought myself too hard on this. When I originally sent this to Al, I actually had Anthony Richardson number one, and I was like, you're a Florida homer. They're gonna say oh, you just put that because he plays for Florida. I was like, I went with Will because seen him for a couple years. The production's been there. The traits have been there. You don't have to second guess well, can he do it? No, he just does it. And all these quarterbacks have some kind of question mark, whether it's Bryce with the size, whether it's Richardson with the lack of production, whether it's Stroud with the knock of coming out of Ohio State, or Levis with his inaccuracy issues. So you take Will Anderson, it's a set it and forget it pick. So he deserves to be number one in my eyes. Probably not going to go number one. Hopefully still in the top 10, but that's one of those players where it's hey, if you're trying to either rebuild or find that missing piece, Will Anderson's definitely your guy.
Well, we've got questions piling up here in the chat, so I'm not going to waste any more time on my stuff because God knows I don't know nothing about no draft. But I will start with Brandy, who asks, Joseph, what are the odds the Cardinals trade with the Packers, swapping 15th for 34 for Buda Baker? What do we see a player arriving during the draft weekend? Other than like, we know Aaron Rodgers will most likely be leaving. Do we see Buda Baker coming to Green Bay?
I can't say I see it. I mean, he's outright said he wants to be, if not the highest.
PAID paid.
Yeah, and the books just, I mean, Russ Ball he is a magician, but I don't know if this is within his wheelhouse to make that contract fit without gutting something somewhere. And Buddha will probably have to wait till after the draft, because although it is a shallow safety class, if if teams get the guy that they want and the projection is there, it's like, hey, I get my Buda Baker, maybe not quite Buda Baker, but I get somewhere in that realm, and I'm saving over the course of a 5-year contract, maybe 25 million. So I think pretty much any like high end free agent is going to have to wait till after the draft and see where the dust settles, because there's going to be some teams that are inevitably out, and I don't think we're ever really in it, to be honest.
I agree with that. Lloyd asks, first of all, he says, good evening, Joseph, which is mighty gentlemanly of him. And then he asks, what is your opinion of safety J.L. Skinner? See, I have no idea who that is.
J.L. Skinner out of Boise State. He's a toolsy guy, not necessarily your high-end safety. I've got him, I think, roughly about a 5th round grade on him.
Right.
His knock to me is just maybe being a little less athletic than you desire. I can't think of his RAS score off the top of my head. I know he's quite, I think maybe in the 7s, maybe lower 8s, but just not quite, in the premium of athleticism.
Premium range, right?
Brian Gutekunst, if we've done the numbers, his average on safety is about an 8.8. And there's very few safeties in that class that even touch that threshold.
I was going to ask you, do you share kind of like what I've kind of gathered is the consensus opinion about the safety class, as far as a real lack of not only just like depth, but just in general talent? And it's funny because I'm always remiss to get too general with, like, you paint these with these wide brushes, right? When you talk about these draft classes at certain positions, and then inevitably some guy jumps out and has a great NFL career, and you're like, well, you found somebody, so there was certainly talent there. Sometimes it's position or fit or scheme or coaching or what have you. But do you share that opinion that this safety class is kind of bereft when it comes to top end talent?
Bereft, I wouldn't necessarily go bereft. I think this safety class has a solid floor, but not necessarily a high ceiling. Like, you can find a guy who can start, and you can find a guy who can produce. You may not get a Pro Bowl season, an All-Pro selection, a Defensive Player of the Year, but you can find some guys that can absolutely, cover your back end. You've got probably one of the, if not the athletic safety of the class in Sidney Brown. I think he's somewhere between day 2, early round 3 to possibly late, round 2. You've got guys who, maybe don't, blow the doors off you, but guys who can absolutely play. And then you've got maybe some guys in the cornerback class who are actually prime candidates to convert to safety, like Quan Martin, which I do believe the Packers did bring in for a visit, although he primarily played corner, is a definite prime suspect to go to the safety room. Riley Moss, who is probably going to be on my don't draft list as a corner. I would absolutely like to see him at free safety. And then I think we haven't heard any news on Kelly Ringo since the combine, but I do believe Brian Gutekunst brought him in for an interview to see, like, hey, are you willing to play safety? Because I think that in the pro game, that's his true fit.
I like it. Cody asked about one of my favorite players in this draft, who I was so pumped about the possibility of the Packers selecting him until he tested, and his RAS was just basically blew him up as a possibility even for the Packers. Does the combine worry you about Brian Branch, another safety that had a bad combine? His film is so good. I agree. I love his film. What are your thoughts on Brian Branch and the possible fit with the Packers?
I love the projection, just too much to let the combine bother me. I don't know if teams feel that way. I mean, the one thing that jumps out for Brian Branch is the missed tackles. In 4 years in Saban's program, we're talking about 3 missed tackles. That's just astounding. And giving the Packers for missing tackles,
exactly.
Like, let me just get that guy in my room, And then also you're talking about a safety that had the second highest rated defense since Minka Fitzpatrick was in Tuscaloosa. So granted, Minka tested great and Brian not so much, but this is probably a player where you have to kind of look beyond the numbers and say like, hey, he's a football player, and he's going to do what he's going to do. And he's really the epitome of this class, maybe not the high end, Troy Polamalu, Ed Reed that you're looking for, on the athleticism chart, but he's not going to cost you a game.
Love it. I'm right there with you. I like I said, I love him as a player. I love his tape. I just got like so depressed when I saw his testing because I was like, well, that would most likely mean the Packers are going to look elsewhere. Ryan gives us a super chat. Thanks for the super chat, buddy. I would like to know, will the Packers give Love a safety valve with a tight end in the first round? That's a good question, Ryan. What are your thoughts, Joseph? I know we've heard from everybody and their mother at this point regarding like tight ends. Do you take them in the first round? The history isn't great. But, man, there are some talented dudes in this class, and if you wait, you might miss out. What are your thoughts? They're sitting at 15. Do the Packers take a shot on one of these tight ends?
As soon as we lost to the Detroit Lions, I got on Twitter and I said, with the 15th overall selection, the Green Bay Packers will select Micah Mayer out of Notre Dame. Wow. And since then, that was my shot. That was my my Kevin Costner, no matter what moment.
Right.
So, and they brought him in. They brought him in. They brought in Kincaid. They brought in Washington. These are not guys that are going to stay till the bottom of day 2. Somebody's going to take them. So we have to, rest with the possibility that, granted, and the middle of the first round, tight end isn't the consensus position you want to go with, but this is that draft class where maybe that's just what you got to do, in a sense of, taken out of a Luke Skywalker reference. This is not going to go the way you think.
Well played. Well played. I like it.
So I think it's absolutely a possibility. If there's a trend in the first round where Mayer, Kincaid, Washington, they start to slide, then I can see, Gutekunst like, let's split the middle. Let's see who's going to fall. And then that goes into those trade back scenarios. But if he feels like, these guys are gone by the time 45 rolls around, then you got to pull the trigger and take your guy.
Big B has a good question. Well, Big B, shout out. How are we feeling about a quarterback in the third round? I think it's funny because that feels early, right? Especially when you're turning the page and handing the reins to Jordan. You have so many holes to fill. But, man, the worst time to look for a quarterback is when you need one. How are we feeling about a day 2 quarterback for the Green Bay Packers?
I would hope not in day 2. And especially not the third round, given that we don't have
how bad they've been in the third round.
In the third round. Right. So that'd be a and then, it'd be the same thing with Jordan. He sits for 20 years and then like, we got this guy and he's not even good, so my targets, and I do have one third round quarterback, and that's Tanner McKee out of Stanford. So, and he actually tested really well athletic wise. I was surprised. He's akin to Matt Ryan. And I was like, I don't know if Matt Ryan is the kind of quarterback, we want in this offense, but he actually tested amazingly well. And that Stanford offense has had, a litany of trouble for the last 5 to 7 years. So maybe he's better than
than the surroundings, right?
And but outside of him, I've possibly Jake Hayner, which I really loved his game in the I believe it was the NFLPA Bowl. He just went off, and I think he's probably a guy you don't want to bet against. But I see him as a maybe like a 5th round guy, maybe in the late 4th round.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I wouldn't be. I think they absolutely take a quarterback in this draft. I'll just be very surprised if it's before day 3. Like you got to have somebody, right? Like I don't think you're going into the season with Danny Etling as your 2. But I think they'll probably sign a vet and draft somebody. Would be my guess.
Right.
I just think the position's too important to not address it, right? And yes, it's great that you're turning the page to Jordan Love, but you got to have guys in the hopper to be developed if, for whatever reason, something might happen with Jordan. But also, just develop guys and turn them loose later on in their career and get some assets for them. I think that would be my thought. That would be my thought.
Yeah, definitely day 3, which I'm hoping, somehow Gutekunst found a way to get a 6th round, out of this draft class. But yeah, like Tyson Bagent, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, guys who are, going to be probably towards the end of the draft, who have some athleticism, maybe, need some footwork, some cleanup in their mechanics. And, hopefully, that preseason comes around, somebody loses a quarterback to an ACL or whatever the case may be, and you flip them for what you paid.
Yep, it could happen. Joseph, thanks for the super chat. So sorry, I just got here and don't know if this was asked. Barring JSN, who do we want Green Bay to draft at wide receiver? There we go. We'll open up the wide receiver talk. Now, JSN would be phenomenal. I'm not dismissing him as a player in any way, shape, or form, but it's mind-blowing to me how he's kind of become the only thing on offer. And I'm really glad Joseph phrased that the way he did. Who are, other than JSN, who would be great? Who else do you see as a possibility for the Packers at wide receiver in any round, day 1 through 3?
Day 2, I fell in love with Michael Wilson out of Stanford. He's had some injury issues over his career, but when he got to the Senior Bowl, he showed that he was miles ahead of.
They love Senior Bowl guys. They love
exactly
show out at the Senior Bowl, no doubt.
And his partner in crime, Jaden Reed out of Michigan State, who is a very speedy, shifty kind of guy. He can get loose real quick. So those are my top 2 targets on day 2. If I could go into day 3, I'd probably say, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, Prince Iosivas out of Princeton, another 4.3 speed guy who dominated in the Ivy League.
Okay.
Wow. And also his stock has kind of fallen a little bit, but Xavier Hutchinson out of Iowa State, basically just us running it back on another Alan Lazard type receiver with
right.
that wingspan, that height, and the strength to block. And then lastly, I don't think he gets his due credit, but Jalen Wayne out of South Alabama, he was a reception king down there for the All-Star game. It was the East-West Shrine game. I think he got about 7 or 8 balls, and he moved the sticks every single time. And I think that's what we're looking for in this offense. And before we move forward, I like to say shame on all these Packer fans who are rooting for JSN, because to me, it's the disrespect to one Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. If Christian Watson were in this draft class, he'd be the number 1 receiver.
Right.
JSN wouldn't be close. Granted, they win in different ways, but
right.
Watson is bigger, stronger, faster. He's more of a weapon that you can move around. I think what was his first touchdown? Wasn't a shovel pass out of the backfield?
Right. Well remembered. Yeah.
And, so I don't understand why we're looking for the 3rd or 4th option in our passing game. And, Packer fans everywhere clamoring.
Well, it's the Madden / fantasy football aspect, right? It's like just all the same types, or, oh, he's the biggest, bestest, most hyped dude. We got to get him and collect all the weapons. And look, I'm not saying, again, that's why I kind of prefaced it that way. I'm not saying JSN wouldn't be an amazing addition, because I think he would be. But it's like, yeah, the idea of long-term investment, you paid a significant amount for Christian Watson last year when you jumped up to grab him in the second round. They tried to get into the first for him. It's like, I understand if you don't go the JSN route in the first round, you know, like there are so many needs on this team. To your point, you made a significant investment at wide receiver. And also, by the way, Dobbs is no slouch. And Samori Torre, when given opportunities, stepped up every single time. So it's like,
Absolutely.
let those guys keep developing. Yes, augment it, add to it. But I'm with you as far as like where you're putting your investments. Like, I understand not heading towards wide receiver at 15. Gary asks, thanks for the super chat, buddy. Hi, Joseph. Who is your hidden gem of this draft? Which is always a great question because there's literally like hundreds of dudes who this could be. But is there somebody who comes to mind when you're asked, who is your hidden gem of this draft?
Hidden gem. Oh, that's
hidden gem.
Because this is one of those draft classes where I don't think there's necessarily gems. There's just really good dudes.
That's fine. We'll take really good dudes.
If
We're
I
all
could,
about really good dudes.
if I could say a gem, I would probably say Keon White out of Georgia Tech. He did visit the Packers. I didn't want to give him his credit when I did the article.
What position does he play? Because I
he's
literally
an
have
edge
no
player.
idea.
I didn't want to give him his credit in the I want to say, was it the Senior Bowl or was it the East-West Shrine game? It was one of the two. He's just a really large human being. And he's faster than you would expect for a guy who's almost 290 pounds.
Right.
Ever since Zadarius Smith, I've loved those hybrid edge players, guys who can play, 2 down and then 3 down as well. And that's Keon White. And the great thing about him that I added in my article is he's only been playing the position for 2 years, and he's already blowing up. He's a guy that when they say get off the bus kind of person, where if you ever play the game and you get off the bus or you're playing at home, you see the visiting team, you're like that guy.
I gotta block that.
Yeah, so he's that kind of person. I don't know how Gutekunst sees him in the defense, whether he sees him as as maybe a possibly 3 down player, 5 technique, 4 technique, or just rushing off the edge. He can probably do both, but I think he's the kind of guy, again, only playing the game for 2 years. I mean, 3 years, 4 years from now, we could be looking at an all-pro, and that's the sneaky need that nobody's really talking about. Is this defensive line just got decimated through free agency?
Couldn't agree more. 1,000%. Yeah, it is interesting because every time you bring it up, people kind of go, yeah, it's like having to eat your vegetables, right? It's like, yeah, Philadelphia literally set records against us on the ground because we couldn't do anything up front. It's like we need help there, 100%. Pack Daddy, thanks to the super chat. Wide receiver Charlie Jones is the perfect addition. He's fast, quick, can play inside or out, and catches everything. Size is a question. Thoughts on him? Wide receiver Charlie Jones.
Charlie Jones out of Purdue. Pack Daddy actually hit it on the head. Size is definitely an issue, but this is a draft class. Not so much a draft class, but this is even more the moment where we might actually see the true Matt LaFleur offense rear its head, and we might see some gadget style players. If we're seeing a similar offense to what we saw last year, I don't think Charlie Jones is the direction that they want to go to.
Agreed.
And then personally, and I actually kind of made this epiphany about a couple days ago. What is it about Big Ten receivers that just don't wow you unless they're from Ohio State?
Right.
So if you think about it, it's like
true.
So
what's funny? I'm so glad you mentioned the idea that if they're operating like they were last year, I don't think he's in play, right? But I will say this. When things were still kind of a hybrid, right? Back in 2020, when they were their most efficient on offense, Tyler Ervin was that like kind of orbit motion, making, having screens, getting him in space, whatever. And then they went totally away from that because Rodgers very clearly didn't like all the motion. Well, okay, now you're going to Jordan Love, and as you say, maybe you are going to a more LaFleur-centric system, whatever that might mean. Do we see the return of that kind of player? Because after Tyler Ervin left, they never really got back to any of that, So maybe if this is a offense that is going to kind of turn back towards that, maybe that's the kind of player they look for. Like, that would not surprise me, especially since it wouldn't be a commitment at 15. That'd be definitely somebody day 2 or 3.
Right, because they did interview, I believe, Kendre Miller and Keaton Mitchell from TCU and ECU's respectively. Both backs were like, I believe, 5'9" at the combine and about 170 pounds. But I'm not a big gadget player kind of guy, because when you see them come on the field, if you got a good defensive coach, like, they know what's coming. It's like either they're going to get the ball or they're a decoy, and they're going to adjust appropriately. And then, it's really just on that player to, maximize their talent in the moment. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see on that one and see what LaFleur likes to do with, his offense at his full disposal from now on.
Totally agree. Flossie, thanks to the super chat. Want Jalen Wyatt so bad. Opposite of Watson, be fire emoji. What are your thoughts on Jalen Wyatt? Because, I think he's fine. I like him. Every time I turn on the tape, I'm a fast guy, real fast. But, man, he's read thin. I don't know how he holds up in the NFL. What are your thoughts there?
I actually heckled Bleacher Report when they did the mock draft, and they traded up to get Jalen Hyatt. I was like, what are you doing? We are not trading up to get a wide receiver. So, and like you said, he's super thin. And then also, the route tree was very limited at Tennessee. It was pretty much, to me, it was hero balls. Like, hey, run a fade, beat the guy, catch it. He's going to have some serious work to do in his route tree at the NFL, no matter where he goes. So from that standpoint, it's a no for me. If he were just to fall, he's hanging out there in the 3rd round. Oh, sure, why not? Maybe we'll take a flyer, especially if it's the 3rd round. I mean, we got nothing to lose. So, but as first or second round, I'm off on Jalen Hyatt.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Gary, thanks to Super Chat. The Cheesehead TV draft guide is what the Sears Christmas catalog when I was a kid. I learned to hope, but not expect. Sometimes what you get is better than what you want. Well, that's really nice of you, Gary. If you haven't yet gotten the Cheesehead TV draft guide, make sure you check it out. The link to purchase your very own copy is in the description of this video. Not one Bears fan in here talking nice. Let's go. Brandy, we got no trolls for a change. I like it. Okay, let me ask you this. If you were to come out of this draft, say, okay, we go through all 3 days and we've done the whole who they've taken, blah, 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 blah. Joseph's dream draft as far as positionally. I don't need specifics as far as the prospects themselves, but where are the positions that end of the weekend you're like, okay, they addressed what I wanted them to address. What positions are you looking at?
I'm looking at edge purely on the defensive line. Again, it's a shallow group right now. Between Wyatt, between Kenny, between TJ, they're going to need some help. They're going to need somebody in that rotation. So whether it's a starter, whether it's somebody, they find, late round, it's got to be somebody who can demand snaps soon. So somebody in that rotation. After that, obviously a safety. It doesn't have to be a guy who wows you. It just has to be a guy who doesn't blow the coverage. And as a person who played 2 ways, a person who played free safety, it's not hard to do. Maybe it's just me. It's not hard to do. Just watch the quarterback, but don't bite on the moves. Just stay disciplined. So Branch again is one of those guys. But outside of that, a third or fourth offense in the passing game. So we don't need, a high-end wide receiver. We just need a guy who maybe can make a mismatch against a dime back. What Rodgers used to say, if he sees a defensive back on the field, he's wearing a 40, I'm throwing the ball
that way.
throwing the ball that way. So we need a guy who can get
Love
mismatched on a defensive back with the number 40. So, and then obviously a tight end. Say what you want. To me, Josiah DeGara is not a tight end. He's a fullback. So we need 2 tight ends, find a veteran, off the street and go from there. And then hopefully some kind of, competition for Danny Etling. If we can come away with that, I think we'll do pretty good. And then maybe as a luxury, we can get Jake Moody out of Michigan so we can have a kicker. So,
oh, and just please draft him so Corey goes ballistic. That'd be great. I love this. We got a few more questions here. Juan doesn't have a question, just has a statement. Brandon Joseph, safety, Notre Dame / Northwestern.
Brandon Joseph out of Notre Dame. I actually liked him in the early scouting process. I had him at a second rounder. The tape didn't necessarily hold up. He's an aggressive guy. Ball production is decently well. I think his testing was probably what held him back. I believe the testing, I want to say, is what held him back. He's still on my board, but he's a guy you're probably going to see maybe around comp pick time. A lot of these really the safety class in general is going to be the high end guys are going to be gone. Branch, Robinson. I can't think of his name out of Texas A&M. Johnson, there you go. Johnson. So top 3 guys, Sidney Brown. Once those guys are gone, Quan Martin, once they're gone, then you'll see a run or you'll see like nobody get drafted. Right. And then they'll just hold off until late, well, maybe not late, but mid day 3. So is he a possibility for the Packers? I could definitely see it. It just depends on when those high-end guys go. Because once those high-end guys go, there's probably going to be a lull in the safety class. We're like, do I really want to, Adrian Amos is right.
I could probably get him a lot later. Yeah. Big B has a great question. Have you done research on Jake Witt from NMU? Had a fantastic pro day at CMU. Day 3 guy who would be a great developmental project. Look at Big B out here with the Jake Witt nod. Can't say I've ever heard of him.
Is that Jake with the tight end? See a Big B.
Yeah, you tell me. I don't know, man. Big B out here pulling stuff that even the most diehard draft Nick is like, who's that?
I'll give credit to Big B. He might have stumped me on that one. I want to say that's a tight end, but you got me on that one, Big B. You got me on that one.
It's all good, man. I'll never forget when I was at Bleacher Report, we did a live draft show from Times Square, and it was we literally did a breakdown for every single selection. It was me and Matt Miller for 3 days, and we got to day 3, and I can't remember what team it was, but somebody took a tight end from some small school, and Matt went, "Oh, this is it. This is the one. I've never heard of this guy ever," and that was it. Like, so. Trust me, man. It absolutely happens.
I love watching. Was it the Stump the Room? I forgot what they said.
Stump the Chump.
Stump the Chump. Yeah, the Chump. You got it.
Not it. Jason, thanks for the super chat. It seems like next year's safety class is really good. Do you see the Packers using a Band-Aid at safety this year and get a stud or 2 next season? What do you think?
I can see that. The safety room needs an addition. We just lost Vernon Scott, so.
Right.
There's got to be somebody that I think the Packers want to add, whether they see them as, a starter for years to come, whether they see them as a stopgap. I don't think you really want to draft for stopgaps. I think you want to find guys who can at least be on the roster, ideally the next 3 to 5 seasons.
Exactly.
They brought in Jamie Robinson. I don't think they brought in Jamie Robinson to, be there for 2 years. So I don't necessarily say that stopgap, but basically a projection of like this guy's going to be on the roster, whether he's a starter or he's the guy that comes in if somebody's hurt or, they're playing, levels declining, but they're going to be on the roster. So could they double dip, in 2024? Depending on draft position, it's a possibility. It just all depends on, how, after the what do they call it, the exit interviews at the end of the season, like, hey, how did this unit do? How did this player do? Right. How is our scheme holding up against the opposition plus the players we have on the roster? That's one of those advanced analytics that the coaches and the front office have to get together to decide, when they form their draft strategy for 2024.
I love it. Well, man, I could talk draft all night, but the bandwidth is limited. So I can't thank you enough for hanging out and taking questions and talking draft. And if you guys out there want some more of what Joseph's cooking up, make sure you pick up your 2023 Pro Football Draft Guide. It's available now from Cheesehead TV. Link to purchase yours is in the description of this video. Joseph will also be joining intermittently. I'm not holding him to all 3 days, but he'll be with us on the live draft stream here at Cheesehead TV. Joseph famously called out that Zach Tom pick way before it happened. By the way, how great was that when there was literally someone in our chat like, who is this dude? And then like legit you call out Zach Tom like, oh, Zach Tom's available. He'd be a great addition. And then the Packers take him. Like that was so dope.
You know, that was, I mean, I love doing this. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes it gets a little tedious. I will absolutely say, you know, between 3 countries, 4 time zones, it's been a ringer. It's been a ringer.
Right.
So when you get stuff like that, you know, it's like, oh, you know, I might actually be good at this, or at least halfway look like, and I know what I'm talking about. So I can't say I don't know if I'm getting lucky, 2 years in a row. This is an awkward draft class, and I think Goody's gonna
look. No one expects you to be Nostradamus, but the fact that you know about so many of these prospects, like we love that you come on every year. I can't thank you enough for the time, man. We'll see you starting next Thursday, without a doubt. Thank you so much for chatting and answering questions, and for contributing to the draft guide. Thanks so much, man. Have a great night.
Thank you. Go Pack, go.